Hey everyone, thanks for your support in 2024. We have a lot of cool stuff coming in 2025, and here are some of the things you can look forward to as we move into next year. In the lead up to The Mandalorian and Grogu in 2026, we'll be starting a full series rewatch of both The Mandalorian and The Book of Boba Fett on exploring hyperspace lanes beginning in October. You can also expect a rewatch of Andor, and we will have reviews of every episode of Andor and the rest of the Skeleton Crew as those come out. Josie will be returning as we continue to rank every Star Wars thing released ever. Reviews of every episode of every Marvel Disney Plus show, including Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, The Eyes of Wakanda, Wonder Man, Ironheart, Daredevil Born Again, and Marvel Zombies, the day after each episode releases, will be available on Beware of Spoilers. We'll be having special event podcasts on 30-minute reviews for the Academy Awards, our 2024 year in review in early January, ranking all of Phase 5 of the MCU after Fantastic Four First Steps comes out, and our 10th anniversary special. Once we complete our rankings of all the Pokemon games on the backlog files, we'll be moving on to Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy. Over on the YouTube channel, you can join in for playthroughs of Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, Pokemon White, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team, Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, Kingdom Hearts Recoded, Mario Golf Toadstool Tour, Sonic Adventure 2, LEGO Racers 2, LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga, and SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. Want to keep on top of all the new things we have coming? Subscribe at mwpnews.com, subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/@mwpnews, or subscribe to Beware of Spoilers, 30-minute reviews, exploring hyperspace lanes, and the backlog files on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, thank you for your support. Good morning and welcome to the Backlog Files. I am Adam. So this week we were going to talk about a Pokemon ROM hack I've been having a lot of fun playing, but there was some news late last week after we talked about the Switch 2 reveal that I feel like would be a disservice if we didn't talk about it, because I'm not entirely sure if everyone quite fully comprehends how this works, and I just want to kind of break it down and use this as an opportunity to explain to people how this works. So let's talk about the impact of tariffs on the Nintendo Switch 2. For those of you who don't know, and I feel like if you're listening to a podcast about video games, I'm sure you don't need this, but last week on Wednesday, Nintendo announced the Switch 2's release date, and, pre-orders to go live on the 9th. The console launches on June 5th. It was going to be priced at $450 or $500 if you get the bundle with Mario Kart World. If you buy Mario Kart World on its own, it's going to be $80, which would be the first of the AAA titles to be priced at $80. Also on Wednesday, after the markets closed at 4 o'clock, Trump went on TV and announced sweeping tariffs in a plan that was not based anywhere in reality, on trying to close trade deficits with tariffs, which does not work, and replace income tax with tariffs also does not work. And historically, we're not going to get into it. It is the goal, allegedly, is to bring manufacturing back to the United States, but we're going to talk about why that is, entirely misguided. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't think it's going to work based on my understanding of how tariffs work. But I mean, I have a degree in political science. I can't make heads or tails of what his thought process was here. Regardless, in the aftermath, the markets crashed, collapsed, and lost about 6% of value. I wrote this on Sunday, so there was another downturn today, not quite as bad as the others, but there still was a downturn. And then by Friday, Nintendo had announced they would be postponing the pre-order date in the United States in the face of new market volatility. This is because the Switch 2 is being manufactured in China, which is currently under a 34% tariff. And that's right now. There's talk of the tariff going higher. So while we wait for Nintendo to tell us what the price is going to be, let's talk about what a tariff is, how it works, and why some people's suggestions to use it as a weapon to move manufacturing to the United States won't necessarily solve the problem. A tariff is a tax that one country imposes on imports from other countries. Say I really like a sandwich, and this company in China makes this sandwich. I really fucking like this sandwich. In a simple system with all things identical, and they have their sandwich, I have a similar sandwich here. It would be cheaper under a tariff for me to buy the new sandwich in the United States. Because then I don't have to pay the tariff. I don't have to pay, like, if it's $1, I don't have to pay $1.34 for the sandwich instead of, $1. Um, that said, that's only if I'm buying direct. If I'm person A buying direct from, company A who's overseas, that's how that would work. That's not how business operates in the United States, though. 9 times out of 10, if you're buying something that was made somewhere else, it's because you went to Walmart or Target or Amazon or wherever the hell you're going to do your shopping, and you're buying a foreign product, something that was made internationally through a retailer. In that case, you're not paying the 34% directly, but the retailer you're buying it from is paying the 34% as the import rate from China. So, as we know, the company is not going to take a loss because that's not how companies work. Because as we've said a million times on this show and on 30-minute reviews, companies are not your friend. The only friends companies have are the shareholders, and that's the only people that have a fiduciary, responsibility to keep happy. And we can all go fuck ourselves to that end. It does not matter what we do. So they're going to pass that on to the consumer. Now, the thing is, the import tariff rate would not be on the retail price, because the retail price is what they're charging you. The import tariff rate is on the price they're paying to the retailer, to the manufacturer. So in this case, let's use the sandwich example again. Let's say it costs 30 cents to make the sandwich. The manufacturer then sells it to the retailer for 50 cents, and then the retailer sells it to you for $1. The retailer is only paying a tariff rate on the 50 cents, not on the resale value. So that would bring the profit will be cut by 17 cents, because 34% of 50 cents would be 17. At this point, the retailer can charge you at least $1.17 to maintain the same profit margin, or take the cut in profit, which, again, not likely to do, or they can charge you more because they don't think you understand how tariffs work. So they can just charge you as much as they want, and you say, well, there's tariffs, so we'll increase the price by whatever we want. Which is going to end up happening. That's going to end up happening. They're going to take advantage of people who don't understand, and that's going to end up happening. Prices are going to go up. Now, the other thing with this is the Switch 2 is being manufactured in China, and there's whole other layers to this, where it's like, I don't know how much the Switch 2 costs to make. I don't know how much Nintendo is charging Best Buy to carry it or GameStop to carry it, and then I don't know how much is going to go there. Since it's unified across multiple retailers, I would assume the profit is like within reason, kind of the same. It's a weird situation. But regardless, let's say what people have suggested. I've seen people suggest this idea that Nintendo should open a plant in the United States and produce the Nintendo Switch 2 here. Number one, that would only serve the American market. It makes no sense for them to open a plant here just to serve the American market when the entire rest of the world is also buying Switch 2s. Number one. Number two, you can't just open a plant. There's a lot that goes into opening a plant. You have to build the building. You have to get the equipment to do it. You need to hire people to staff the plant. It's a whole big thing. Like, it's not just like, I will wave a wand and now, poof, here's a plant. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that Nintendo had that magic wand. Let's say, for the sake of argument, Nintendo had the ability to, poof, we have a plant now. We opened a plant in Ohio, and we now have we now have a Switch 2 plant. Let's use the sandwich example again. Okay? It's not Nintendo, it's another company. We have a plant, we're going to build it in America. But all the materials for the sandwich are not in America. All the parts are manufactured elsewhere. So we'll say, for the ease of this, because this calculation can get a little bit iffy if we don't do this the easy way, let's say that, all the materials are made in China, and each material costs 10 cents each. Say it's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you need bread, you need peanut butter, you need jelly. Each one costs 10 cents, and we need, we need to import all three. Well, now you're paying an import tariff on all three parts. So if each one's 10 cents, you're paying an import tariff that's going to bring it up to an additional 10 cents, which is not as much as the import tariff if you were paying just to import the whole thing, but it's still sizable. Now, there's another key aspect of this, which is human rights violations. The reason why we have things so cheap here is because, or so cheap here right now, is because we outsource all of our jobs, all of our manufacturing, to these countries where they don't have unions. They don't have OSHA. They don't have, National Labor Relations Board. They don't have to pay a living wage, or anything like that. These are all things that go into keeping the cost low. So if we were to move manufacturing here, you got to pay union wages. Even if you're not paying union wages, which appears to be what this administration is trying to do by gutting things like the National Labor Relations Board and the Department of Labor and things like that, even if we aren't going to, even if we aren't doing that, we got to pay a federal minimum wage. You still got to pay at least $7.50, which is several orders of magnitude more than what they're paying now. I'm not saying it's right, but that's the way it is. So even if it was, okay, we're going to move everything here, and now the tariff is only 10 cents extra instead of 17 cents extra, in the sandwich example, you still got to pay everything else that goes into it. All the infrastructure that's going into this is gonna have to be offset. So Nintendo is gonna end up jacking the price out. The amount of manufacture that would be required to relocate this into the United States to make the Switch 2 tariff free is borderline, if not entirely, unrealistic. Because you would need to get every other company that's manufacturing the control sticks, the magnets for the Joy-Con 2s, all the chips inside. All of these things have to be relocated into the United States. And again, this would be entirely to serve the American market to avoid having to pay these tariffs. And that's a ridiculous thing. We talk about how the collapse of this is like attacking globalization. At the same time, globalization is why why we have so much cheap shit here. Second off, we do not have all the raw materials within our borders, so we still do have to import some things, which will still bring the price up. Back in reality, Nintendo is not going to relocate production to the United States. What they're going to do is they're just going to increase the price, I would say, by at least 34% to offset and keep that same profit margin. We're not too far removed from the launch of the 3DS and that disastrous launch that showcased, for those who forgot, they launched it at $250. Very few people bought it, so they dropped the price to $180 or $160, $180. And then once it was dropped to $180, anyone who had early adopted had the ambassador program that gave them a bunch of free games, but anyone else, they just dropped the price. To an extent, and we're also not far enough removed from the Wii U. Nintendo is going to look at this, and they're going to be like, well, shit, what do we do? We can't drop the price from here now, especially if we're increasing the tariffs. I would assume that the price of $450 is the cheapest they could sell this for. I genuinely think if they could have sold it cheaper, they would have, because they don't want to deal with the price issue. And I feel like there's also some built-in stuff for market instability in there. Because it's not like we're dealing, there's no reason why, when they announced the Switch 2 a few months ago, initially back in February, they don't also announce, maybe you do this direct now to show off, the games, but there's no reason why you don't announce the price, pre-order date, and that, unless you're trying to see, what's the market going to look like down the line when we get closer to June? Because this is a very truncated time to announce a $450 console for people who have to save up for it. So this whole thing is weird. I would anticipate it being at least $600 when the new price is announced, with the possibility that Mario Kart World hits $100 for a physical copy. The interesting thing will be if Nintendo applies these software price increases that I'm making up in my head as I go along with this. What if they do that? If they increase the price of a physical copy, do they also increase the price of a digital copy? And I think the smart thing would be no. Because according to the current World Trade Organization agreements, digital properties are not subject to tariff, and that's an international agreement. Now, the Trump administration, over both this and the first term, from 2016 to 2020, have made it clear that, or 2017 through 2020, they don't care about the international order, so who knows if they're going to stick with that, but that's how it is. So, that said, if you or anyone out there heard Trump on a podcast or on his Twitch stream and decided to vote for him, that is why you can't afford a Switch 2. He is 100% the reason. Because this whole thing with tariffs has no basis in reality. This is not going to relocate manufacturing back to the United States with any expediency that's going to solve this problem that is not actually a problem. Like, the idea that we're going to relocate all the manufacturing here is not going to solve that. So look, you may be able to say the N-word on Twitter, but when you can't afford your basic human needs or the luxury items like the Switch 2, keep this in mind. On that note, it is unlikely we're going to be covering the Switch 2's games at launch or reviewing the console at launch, which is a shame because I had that planned. We actually had money budgeted to get a Switch 2 because Nintendo doesn't really like to give us things because this is a small show. MWPnews.com is a small outlet. We don't have the pull to have Nintendo give us stuff, and I understand that, and I'm not demanding that they do. If they do, great, we'll cover it. If not, we won't. Um, so games like Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, and then later titles like Kirby Air Riders or that Hyrule Warriors game will not be covered, and then also we won't be trying out GameCube games on the Switch too. These will be postponed. We will eventually do it. I don't think prices are going to drop precipitously. I don't think anything like that's going to happen. Um, I'm holding out hope that we reach a point where I can afford to buy a Switch too. Um, and if so, we will cover it. That said, um, we will still cover Pokemon Legends ZA because that's coming out on both. The same goes for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. And then also titles like Story of Seasons Grand Bazaar, Shadow Labyrinth, Witchbrook, Tamagotchi Plaza will still likely be reviewed depending on what impact tariffs have on individual game prices and if companies decide to pass that tariff price increase onto physical copies as well. Um, or onto digital copies as well. It's a very fluid situation. We're trying to work on it. That said, the money that would have gone to the Switch 2, like we didn't like it was earmarked in the budget where it's like we had like $350, or it's like okay, we're gonna put this aside. I didn't think it was gonna go up to $450 and then $500 with the game and then tax on top of that. So in my area, it would have been like $550. So it's a sizable enough shortfall where it's like fuck it, we're just not gonna do it. Um, we're going to put that money into indies. We are going to be focusing a lot on indie games this year and independent movies. So, some things we're going to be doing. Larger focus on film festivals. We'll be doing more at Tribeca, more at New York Film Festival, more at Hamptons, more at Stony Brook, more at Life, maybe New York City Independent again. We're going to be doing a lot more film, maybe Brooklyn. There's a lot of festivals that happen in the New York City area. We're going to be doing a lot of those. Hopefully, I can get Josie to go to New Hampshire this year because the one in I think it's in Portsmouth is apparently really cool and it's an Academy Award qualifying. I'm going to talk to her about that. The other thing we're going to be putting money into is independent games. So I bought a few indie games on Steam, and we're going to be talking about those. So I figured it was a good use of the money to try and support those who are trying to, get their start in the industry. And on that note, we will be back next week to talk about a new game. It's a new indie game called Bookbound. And until then, have a great rest of your week.